Good day. Welcome to the United States Volunteers Joint Services Command. This is the headquarters of the 10th Regional Command Forward, Las Vegas, Nevada, for Commanders Conference 2016. Welcome to all.
It's been a real interesting conference and met lots of really nice people. My feet hurt from all the walking I did on the Vegas Strip. So note, be sure you wear comfortable shoes for that walking. But it was very nice and look forward to having people come to our city, Seattle, next year.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike McKinney. I'm president of Promise Christian University. And it's a real delight and pleasure to be once again with you on this telecast. We also have a guest in studio that we're very excited about interviewing, and that's General Ray Coffey and his lovely wife, Mrs. Coffey. General,
Sir, thank you very much,
nice to have you with us on our program from the Promise Live Broadcasting Network, and we're delighted. We just completed our regular national conference here in Las Vegas for the United States Volunteers Joint Services Command, which General Coffey is the Commanding General of the 10th Region. And sir, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Sir, it's an honor for us to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And how did you become part of this wonderful organization, the USV?
Well, I've had just a wonderful career, blessed by God, in marriage over the last 45 years. I come from a long military family heritage. I'm the sixth generation of the Coffey family here in the United States. Our original ancestor immigrated from County Court Island approximately 1671 and landed in Virginia Colony, Elizabeth City, Virginia Colony. Through the years, my ancestors all served in the militias or the Continental Army, and then later on in the Army of the United States during the Mexican War. Actually, during the War of 1812, I had a distant great uncle that was Andrew Jackson's battalion commander that held the left line during the Battle of New Orleans in 1814. And it was credited in the history books for his volunteers that consisted of Native Americans, pirates, volunteer citizens, and it was kind of the beginning of the family history of the U.S. Volunteers. So it's how it does work out. During the Mexican War, my great-grandfather served with the Army of the United States. He was from the Mississippi Guard, and they were federalized under General Scott and went into the Mexican campaign and came back. After the war, he married in a young woman of 17 years of age from the Jefferson Davis family. She was a distant niece or cousin of Jefferson Davis, and her name was Mississippi Serene Davis. She had a sister named Virginia and a sister named Georgia. And they were known as the three queens of the South in the southern area. Before the Civil War, they set up a farm, a plantation, outside of a small town called Fayette, Mississippi. And today the land still exists and is in distant relatives' hands. Our traditional family home that was built back in that era was purchased by a doctor and his wife, and due to the county expanding and roadways going, the home had to be taken down, but it was already under the registry, and so when they let it move, they had to register every board on the home before they took it down. The wonderful doctor and his family relocated it about 10 miles to the south near a small town called Selma, Mississippi, very near Natchez, off the Natchez Trace. And we've had a wonderful opportunity to meet him and see the home and walk through the heritage. A picture of my great-grandfather hangs on the wall over their fireplace.
Oh my goodness!
In his pure Confederate gray uniform right after the beginning of the Civil War.
I see.
And so my grandfather fought for the South very much. Unfortunately, he was wounded during the Peninsula Campaign, taken captive by the North. He was in prison for about 6 months, but because of his war wounds, they pardoned him or released him and exchanged him for another Northern captain. He went back to the South. Jefferson Davis brevetted him to a colonel, sent him back down to Natchez, or to the Fayette area, and they established a shoe factory, manufacturing boondockers, what they were called. These were original boots that were used by the slaves, but the Confederate Army now needed shoes for their soldiers. So he was a tanner by his official trade, learned through the years, and set up a shoe factory. Well, during the Vicksburg campaign, when General Grant came down through the Mississippi Valley, past Vicksburg and circled through, he went right through my grandfather's farm. The shoe factory was burned down, the crops were taken, but the family home remained. They did, for whatever reason, they did not destroy the family home.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason that home still exists here today. My grandfather was born in Fayette, Mississippi, as well as my father. My grandfather, during the post-Civil War era, also was a military man. He joined the Mississippi Guard back then. This is all before we had National Guard, but it was the Mississippi State Guard.
State by state.
And when the Spanish-American War broke out, their unit was activated and became part of Theodore Roosevelt's U.S. Volunteers.
The Rough Riders.
Well, he was a cavalry officer, but what they did, they separated the command, and he fell under General Arthur MacArthur.
Oh my gosh,
which
another
was
familiar name.
for the U.S. Volunteers, yes, where we get a history and lineage.
Oh man.
They were mobilized and they were sent to San Francisco, where they embarkaded out of Fort Mason, San Francisco, California, and went to the Philippines in 1889. And he served my father and his siblings and his mother stayed at San Francisco, Fort Mason.
Yeah.
That family home still exists
Still
on the
there.
fort. We
Still there.
got pictures of all that. And through the years, they had the Spanish-American War ended very quickly. It was probably about a 2-year war at the most. But they kept the U.S. forces, then the U.S. volunteers still representing the United States, there in the Philippines. Well, an insurrection occurred with the Philippine indigenous, we would call them like American Indians.
Yes, yes.
And again, they were highland natives, but they were much larger than your average Filipino. In fact, their average height was around 6 foot.
Wow.
They were almost like a Samoan, very big
Large
bone,
men, yeah.
large men.
And they were warriors, right?
They were warriors. And what they found out, that the type of weapons that we were using at that time, we were still using the Colt 45 revolver, a carryover from the Civil War area. But what they found out is they could not drop these attacking warriors because they were so large. The caliber of bullets, they could put many bullets into one person, they would still be coming.
They're still coming.
And so they went to the United States military and says, we need a more powerful sidearm for our cavalry. And so that's when the Model 911 45 caliber weapon was standard weapon sidearm issue up through the Vietnam War was developed. And it was developed for one reason, because the 45 with 2 rounds would drop these natives. And so they were able to fend themselves off.
And they used that weapon in the World War I as well.
It was used in World War I. It was called Model 911, but it was actually fielded for the first time in 1901, 1902, and 1903 in the Philippines. Let me tell you how God has taken it from this point. This is where the big picture. My parents weren't really regular church attenders. In 1962, my father's health got really bad. He had cancer. And because of his number of long years of standing aboard ship, he developed a disease in his lower legs called arteriosclerosis.
Oh my.
And he was advised to have this pretty dangerous surgery, but he decided to keep postponing it. Well, he had to retire from his civilian work, and he had just a wonderful career. He was a stock manager at Frederick & Nelson department store, which was the main big store in Seattle over the years. And then later on, he was a sales executive for the Automobile Club of Washington, and also a secret shopper for them,
Oh.
where he went down and visited hotels and things, and that's another story.
Yeah.
Growing up, we'll get into maybe sometime later, but long story short, his health was not good. I was his youngest son, and I became his driver.
Oh.
He still ran his businesses of tax accounting and the like from our home, and I would do all his delivery.
Sure.
Well, it was interesting that after about our second date, I brought Linda over to the house to meet my parents. I'd already met her parents and went through the scary thing of meeting my girlfriend's parents. And
They liked him though, right?
Yeah.
It was so,
well,
yeah.
my mother-in-law, bless her heart, is still living. She's 92 years of age.
Oh.
And she says, I will always remember you walking up the aisle to our front door. And she was singing at the time, that is the most skinniest, tallest. I was 6'2" and 145 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
But nowadays it's a little bit different.
You're more substantial, isn't it?
Yeah, more foundation.
Aren't we all?
But met her parents. But I brought her over on a Sunday afternoon
Yes.
to meet my parents. And as soon as she got in, walked up the front door of the house, she said, I've been here before. I said,
Really?
That's what I said, really? And it says, we've been living in this house since 1956. When were you here? Well, it turns out that my father had put out a bid to have the whole house repainted.
Okay.
Linda's father was a professional house painter.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And so Linda
Oh.
dropped over, and this was months before our first date, to the house one evening at the dinner hour, and a bid for having the house painted. And she had come to the door, and I got up from the dinner table, as the youngest son does, and answered the door, and this nice girl was there and says,
Yeah.
I have a bid for my father, for your father, on this. And I said, thank you very much, and closed the door. And that was probably our first encounter.
Yes.
Our second encounter was each high school every year, they always had this thing called the senior skip day.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, where would be the most unlikely of a place that the teachers would look for the seniors skipping? It's usually the parks and the beaches and stuff.
Sure.
She ended up coming over to Lincoln High School from Roosevelt High School,
Oh, my.
posing as our friend's cousin from Alaska. Well, Linda was born and raised in Alaska and lived up there until she was at, junior high, honey, or elementary school?
Yeah, junior high.
Anyway, she knew enough of that she could fake it.
Sure.
And so anyway, she came in. We were in a contemporary problems class. I remember it very well. She came in. Sharon, my good friend, was here. I was here, and Linda was sitting up front. She came out, and we looked at each other. And you think, hallelujah, lightning bolts and things like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Oh,
Nothing.
man.
No. Oh, nice girl. Yeah. Looks attractive. Like short hair. Yeah. Okay.
No.
And
No
nothing.
sparks.
No spike. Absolutely nothing. But it was later on, Sharon kept coming at me. She just broke up with her boyfriend over here,
Oh.
and I had been in a long-term relation with a lovely girl that went to Roosevelt High School.
Yeah.
We were in a music marching band program, and we knew each other since we were about 14 years of age. And I was the drum major, and she was the drummer, and so we had this long-term relationship. But we were definitely going different ways because I was definitely down the military side of the track, and she was going kind of the other direction of the peace program.
I see.
But we broke up as friends, but nothing major from that. But when you're in a relationship for a number of years, it does leave an empty hole there.
Yes, the void.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
Yes.
long short of it, making the story hopefully even shorter, is that.
We have 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, is that we got this double date together and went from there. But right after the double date and meeting my parents, this was on a Sunday, my father had a fatal heart attack that Wednesday.
Oh.
And this was days before I had gotten my final notice that I had been a candidate for the Naval Academy. I had already joined the U.S. Naval Sea Cadet Corps when I was 14 and had just become selected as the first Naval Sea Cadet midshipman in the United States. My serial number was 001. I have this document still at home today saying that I was the first of that program that happened. And I'd already enlisted into the Navy Reserve. My draft number was 2 for that particular calendar year. And so I knew I was going to go into the service. The war was still raging, Vietnam was on, and so, but I knew that I wanted to have some choices, and I wanted to follow my father's footsteps in the Navy. I was raised that way, thought Navy, that Navy was the only thing I was going to do. But God really had some other ideas.
Another plan.
And other ways for my life. Well, at my father's death, if it wasn't for Linda being right there,
Yeah. Yes.
being the youngest at home, my brother was already on active duty serving in the Navy in the war. My sister had already been married for about 6 years at that time, and she was in the area but not at home. So it was my mom and myself.
Yeah. It was a devastating moment.
Right. In fact, I was called to the scene. My father collapsed at a local drugstore just blocks from my high school, and I got an emergency call to come to the principal's office and saying, there's been an incident at the drugstore. Your father is ill. You need to go there right away and pick up the car and take it home and get your mother and take him to go to the hospital.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I ran, like I was on the track team and cross country team, and so I ran my heart out. I got to the drugstore where he had collapsed. The ambulance was there. I could see my father in the back. Again, not like the 8-unit cars that we have today, they're closed in. This was a station wagon ambulance with side windows. I could see my father laying in there. He had looked like a breathing mask on. I thought maybe he was just unconscious, but unbeknownst to me, he had already expired. And they made the declaration of death once he reached the hospital. I picked up the car, got the car keys, and talked to the pharmacist. He said that your father had come in, was ordering some things, and he said, I'm just not feeling well. And the pharmacist says, why don't you sit down here and get you a drink of water? And my father sat down, had a drink of water, and immediately collapsed and fell on the floor. And he was 69 years old, just short of his 70th birthday. So I picked up my mother, met her at the hospital, notified my sister who was in the area that something was going on with my dad. And we've had other little scares like that. And we thought, well, we'll go in and see him. And then we waited there for over an hour, and no one had come out to talk to us. And we kept wondering what is going on, what's taking so long. And we kept trying to reassure each other that he'd be okay. But somehow my mom knew. She thinks this is going to be it. Well, Funny came out and said that, I'm sorry, we couldn't save your father. He passed. But they got him all cleaned up, and we went in there and said our goodbyes and everything. And then we had to do the hard part. We had to notify through the Red Cross, pull my brother off of active duty, and he had to come home and get a hold of our sister and all the other relatives. And prior to that, my parents started attending church before my father got ill, and they'd been attending with some good friends of ours the church in Seattle called the University of Washington, under the United Church of Christ, the University Congregational Church. Then Pastor Dale Turner was the senior pastor. Wonderful man. In fact, he was saved at a Christian revival as a young man, but went to divinity school and got involved with the United Church of Christ program movement. My father had full military honor cemetery, and Dr. Turner was the officiant through there, and so we had started really a lifetime relationship with the Turner family. But through all that, and God placing Linda where I needed her at that time, literally the shoulder to cry on. But we also, in that time period, we had 2 senior proms, 2 senior cruises, 2 commencement exercises, and then I got the notification that it was a non-select for the Naval Academy, which was another big disappointment.
Yeah, you were so disappointed.
And but I was an alternate. He said, if there's something happens, an alternate. Well, at the same time, my orders to go on active duty, since I graduated high school, came to go on active duty. I was a quartermaster. I had already earned my petty officer rating in E4, and I was a quartermaster. A quartermaster is the navigator's assistant. Well, they were developing the brown water Navy with the Army and the Navy for the Vietnam rivers. And I was scheduled to go to Riverboat Patrol School as a quartermaster and go through that training in Southern California and then on to Vietnam. Well, because I was the youngest son at home, my brother had returned to his active duty post after the funeral, and I went before the Navy Board applying for a deferment from my initial active duty orders and to be able to stay at home until my brother got off of active duty, and then I would serve my time. I wanted to go become a commissioned officer, and so my next choice was ROTC,
Sure.
University of Washington. Wanted to be a Husky, and so I went before the Navy Board and asking for appeal for a deferment. Well, the board was very judicious. They pulled out my records and read through everything and said, "Sailor, your initial contract said that you signed that you would be in the 2x6 program. You would be in the reserve for 1 to 2 years upon your completion of high school, and that you would immediately go on to active duty into your assignment. You were assigned to go to Riverboat Patrol School, California, sometime." And then this other officer to the left was also looking through my files and he says, "Well, it says here you were a candidate for the Naval Academy. Why didn't you take the appointment?" I said, "Sir, I was an alternate. I did not get the principal appointment." And he says, and then the senior board person pulled the file over and looked through it and said, "Well, Sailor, you still want to go to the academy?" And I said, "Sir, yes, sir."
Yes.
And I tell you what, Sailor, we'll change your orders here. The prep school has already started. You're about 15 days behind their start date. And this was in August of '69. They start the classes in June. And he says, "You're not too far behind on this. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll change your orders from Riverboat Patrol School, send you to the United States Naval Preparatory School at Bainbridge, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore, wherever that was." Remember, I'm a West Coaster.
Of course.
And he says, "We'll let you go to the preparatory school and let you enter the academy next year. Is that okay with you, Sailor?"
Oh.
I saluted as fast as I could, grabbed the papers, did an about face, and got out the door as fast as I could before anybody changed their
What a
mind.
great opportunity.
And that's how God got me into the Naval Academy through the back door,
Wonderful. But he did it.
through the death of my father.
And this lovely lady came into your life, and God sent her as not only your wife, but a helpmate, but at that time, even already comforting you.
Right,
and
absolutely.
strengthening you. That's wonderful.
I had like 2 weeks to go to get my orders and get everything all packed up and shipped off. So it was like near the end of August we took off. I took off to the prep school.
Sure.
And we didn't see each other again until Christmas time.
But you must have been very proud of him, Linda. You saw
Yeah,
the potential that was in this young man at that time.
Yeah, but we had a lot of things in common. We enjoyed and stuff like that. And we had a wonderful high school romance during that
how
summer.
sweet.
Summer '69.
Oh,
we
boy.
watched together the landing, the astronaut landing on the moon, and
yeah.
all those things that happened in the summer of '69. And we started letter writing. Again, in those days, we had no email. It was tin cans and a string for communications.
Pony Express.
And you did not call long distance very long. But every leaf cycle, we
2 minutes.
okay. Every leaf cycle, we wrote letters back and forth. But we had a number system that my dad talked about his letter writings from the Pacific to his mom, to my mom.
Sure.
And so we had a number cycle, so we put numbers on the back of our letters and a code underneath the stamp turned upside down.
Oh, okay.
She would perfume all her letters that got sent to me.
Very clandestine.
Okay, so in those days, the prep school, we had noontime formation, did the parade,
Sure.
marched off to meals together. But before we marched off, they handed out mail.
Oh.
And the mails would get passed down the line. And here's this letter.
You knew it was Linda.
Yeah, it was coming down the line and says, "Okay, Coffey's got another one."
Coffee's got another. Everybody knew.
Yeah, and of course, when I was my first year at the academy, it was even more interesting because she and her mom would send cookies to us.
Oh, that's nice.
Again, the years I went to the academy, it was all male institution,
Of course.
and the women were considered accoutrements to your activities.
Yes. Of course.
And we were required to keep a picture of our girlfriends or someone dear to us,
Right.
female, in the cover of our hat,
Okay.
on our saucer hat. And if you didn't have one in there, you got a demerit or chastising from
It's a very nice tradition.
Yeah, tradition.
Yeah.
And so during the mail call, you get slips that saying that you have a package. Well,
Oh,
the upper class, it goes to the upperclassmen, the second classmen, to the third classmen, to the plebes. Okay, we're on the end of the squad. And so they would all know that Coffey's got a package again.
again.
And so
Linda, you were so faithful. Right?
that's how I survived my plebe year, with her mother and her
The
cookies
encouragement that was
bribing the upperclassmen.
What a tremendous story. Okay.